Hello everyone and welcome back to Ginger Prime. My name is Brian if you're new around here, but for returning subscribers, you incredible individual, for watching today's video, you unlock the free title of Dragon Slayer. That's right, that's what you get, the Dragon Slayer title. First time given out on this channel, enjoy it. Feel free to rep it in the comments below. Today we're diving into the New World developer roadmap. This is going to take us, and it looks like it's primarily focusing in on the first quarter 2022, so we don't have a full year picture, but I think we have a picture in which that we can actually start to, I guess somewhat predictably understand what the goal and what the cadence that the New World devs are going to be working on and rolling out. This is going to be more of my thoughts and my opinions on the subject. They actually released a full hour-and-a-half video. I'll include a link to it if you guys want to go watch it for yourselves. I've got it broken up in my thoughts here in segments, so we're gonna kind of just go with it. I really hope that you enjoy this video. If you do and you like MMORPG content and you haven't yet subscribed, I encourage you to consider it if you feel like I earn it, and you can unlock your title by doing so by hitting that subscribe button. And if you already are subscribed, maybe consider hitting that like button if you feel like I earned it. It really does help out the channel and the content. Obviously, right now, we've been doing a lot of playthrough with Final Fantasy XIV Endwalker. And if you like my Final Fantasy content, New World content, Lost Ark, and more, that's what you're going to get here at the Ginger Prime channel. All right, let's talk about what we're going to be looking at here going into the next, pretty much, if you think about it, 3.5 months. That's the core aspect. I'm going to focus in on a couple things. First and foremost, new weapons and mutators, because this is going to then bridge into endgame content, and then overall we're going to just kind of go back through and just touch on the different items that they're kind of listing here. First things first, we've already seen the blunderbuss, we've already seen the daggers, as opposed to we saw Void Gauntlet, we called that, and I'm glad they got that in. But they're talking about the blunderbuss as a kind of a hybrid ranged strength type build. So honestly, that's going to change up the sandbox, I think, a lot. Obviously, everything is subject to change until this drops, but they're talking about the blunderbuss, they're talking about daggers, and they're confirming greatsword, which actually was confirmed to me privately, which I'm so excited now we can actually say, yes, they are looking at a greatsword, and essentially that gives us 3 new weapons, and I think the fact that they're actually sharing these 3 new weapons with us does tell me that we should probably be seeing these 3 roll out over the course of the next 6 to 9 months. I expect that we'll be seeing something rather large around the 1-year anniversary of this game. But if you think about it, we just got the Void Gauntlet. We'll be probably looking at, I would assume, the blunderbuss sometime in January or February, followed by daggers sometime later in the spring or early summer, and then finally maybe rounding it out with a greatsword. We'll have to see if they pick up the cadence, because what you can also glean from this roadmap is that they're really kind of targeting kind of a major update once a month. Now, we already covered the interview with Scott Lane, but they reiterate here that a big part of the problem was like going too fast. And as a developer working in this industry, working in this field, both as a hobbyist game developer, but also as a professional software developer, note that I really kind of relate to that. That was my advice to them, as like they need to slow down. And they kind of touch on that, especially with the patch notes and more. So we'll dive more into that. But personally speaking, blunderbuss, daggers, greatsword, that's gonna make this sandbox game very exciting, especially as it relates to both PvE and PvP, and that's going to tie right into the mutilators. Personally speaking, I'm really excited to see what a greatsword can do in this. They talk about having perhaps different stances with the greatsword sword, which I think opens up a lot of different playstyles, especially it relates to the sandbox, with potentially other weapons both going forward and also looking at it going backwards. They specifically hit on the concept of being able to equip a shield with other one-handed weapons, and they said this. They said that essentially it is knocking at the door, but it is not at the table. So that's telling me that they definitely have heard that feedback, and they are definitely trying to come up with a plan for that. These things, I would estimate, would be anywhere from 12 months to 24 months to have that kind of system architected and brought into the core aspect of the game. So set your hindsight, or your sight, hindsight, that makes no sense, towards a 2-year period, especially as it relates to that specific feature based off of their words alone right here. Now, beyond that aspect, they said it's actually much faster to basically come out with a weapon and a shield equivalent as kind of a set. So just like you see sword and shield, like if they came out with a hatchet and shield set that was specific to that, that actually is much faster based off of how the system is architected and the tools that they have available. So note that that is something that we might actually see happen prior to any kind of mix and match specific shield builds. I do think, and I would like to see them get into that aspect, personally speaking, but that would actually turn shield into its own skill-based type weapon, and then that basically has an impact on what are you doing with all the different skill trees and more. So as soon as you start asking more deep questions on that subject, you start to realize that like the whole system ends up getting overhauled with that little change, and that's why I would again put it out of that 2-year mark at a minimum, something maybe around either a first expansion or a second expansion, depending on how that cadence is going to go. So personally speaking, very excited by what they've talked about here today, because the weapon system in this case, I think opens itself up to so much player-driven choice, so much freedom. Let's focus in on mutators. Mutators are an endgame activity in which that from a key perspective, they say the keys are universal. Once you have a mutation key, you're going to have it. And that's going to give you the ability to kind of climb these ladders in terms of content, both in challenge and in reward. And thus it's going to bring about more hardcore based content to really push your builds to the maximum. Here is my first thought, my last thought, the thought that I had persisting through this section during the video. It was primarily based on mutators tell me I really, really wish we had loadouts that could be saved. Because when it comes to it, this is a weekly challenge. Again, hardcore PvE content. Like, for example, like enemies could explode or they could drop area of effects. Ultimately, it's going to take the expeditions that we have and level them up, and you can continue to push them further and further. It sounds like a bit of Mythic Plus. I'm not a big WoW player, so you can guys correct me if I'm wrong in that regards, but mutators in this regards, both for reward, both for progression, both for challenge, and a weekly cadence in terms of what ultimately is happening, has me as excited as a player. But also then I'm like, well, if this week's challenges are going to be this, and I need this kind of build, like ultimately, sounds like I need a PvP build, a PvE build, and a mutator build, right? Like that at a minimum, now we're looking at 3 builds that I would love to see happen in that regards. So that's kind of the big thought that I'm having with the mutators as it exists together. So that is the big piece of content when it goes to the weapons and the mutators. And this ties into the endgame content changes, which we just rolled out with patch 1.2, which I've only got to spend a little bit of time. Obviously, Endwalker is taking up a big chunk of my time, and rightfully so. I don't think, whenever I'm whenever I'm not in queue, that's exactly where I want to be right now. But with the gypsum system, they talk about why adding it, why getting rid of high watermark, and high watermark was 100% random. If you guys have ever heard me talk about progression systems, I have no issue with random as long as there's a static, measurable way to kind of also progress. This was the big weakness of Anthem, was 100% progression at a certain stage that was random, 100%, meaning you and I could go do work, you get paid, I don't get paid, and there's no real reason why I don't, like no evidence of why not getting paid. So at its core, the fact is the gypsum system gives you the ability to make static progress, to make predictable progress. There's still RNG progress, and there's nothing wrong with that when it's married with some kind of predictable process, aka the gypsums. And so they go into the why there's so many different gypsums in that regards, because couldn't it just be easier just to have one standard type? And they base that off of I guess the difficulty or time commitment of the different activities, thus rewarding different types of gypsum to get your end goal. I think that essentially that, like, it makes sense from a balancing perspective right up at front, right? Like when you're like, okay, I get that. You really kind of ask yourself the questions. They could have just done one type of gypsum and made like the reward structure of the gypsum like pay out different ways. For example, okay, yes, maybe you get 3, from this activity, or you get 20 from that activity, making the 20 activity way more like rewarding. The counterpart to that is that ultimately, if you're only incentivizing, like if it's so much more better to do the 20, then you're just kind of trying to funnel people into one specific activity, because at the core of it, efficiency brain ticks into play. So there's ways to kind of go about it. I think ultimately, if they had multiple different types of gypsum, like they have actually, the fact they got multiple gives them the ability to kind of tweak it based off of the different avenues, the lanes, if you will, versus one type and just increasing the different rewards one way or the other. Efficiency brain's going to tick in, and the math ends up becoming easier, right? It's one of the reasons why you see like a lot of these free to play games, change your money into so many different types of currency, so that by the end of it, when you don't actually know what it's cost for what you're spending here in, less like, I guess shady ways, that it's the kind of the same concept, that you're not sitting here going like, well, I got 20 things from that activity and I got 5 things from this activity, but so that makes that activity 50% better for me to do, and thus it becomes the only way to do it. And that's just a human nature thing. So that's just kind of my thoughts regarding the gypsums. Ultimately, I'm actually still level 54. I believe endgame starts at level 1. Welcome to the channel if you're new. You'll hear me repeat that over and over again. With a player-driven economy, I find playing the game at my leisure and at my own pace very, very more rewarding than typical, I guess, content creators in that regards. Okay, so we talked about the balance of tuning, mutators, and the endgame progression. I'm very excited to see ultimately how that goes. They did downscale the gear, and rather than increase the level cap, because they're planning on the level cap of gear actually increasing with the mutators system, and then having that basically where more content, more challenging content has a gear score kind of increasement. Great words here that you can always expect from me. The winter convergence currently is going on. Obviously, they talk about the joy and the darkness, the contrasting forever winter that's apparently approaching. Tournament are staving off for it. I've been able to participate a little bit in this activity. I actually really enjoy it. I really appreciate, these kind of seasonal type of activities, and I'm looking forward to not just finishing this one, but also diving more into other ones down the line. And I love the Winter Yeti in and of itself. Very excited to hopefully experience more of that with you. And now that our servers are actually getting merged, more on that soon, that's actually going on while I'm filming this video. I'm looking forward that we can have a more active and bustling community. So if you guys are looking for somebody to play New World with, we have our Discord link is in the description, and we can kind of team up from there. They talk about their vision for New World, and they want a world where PvE and PvP players not only coexist, but they actually complement each other. And they also need to really give, players the ability to both overthrow tyrants, yes, absolutely, as well as overthrow absent leaders. Right now, obviously, everything's being in flux. The world populations are, they are what they are due to the fact of how the game launched. It was always going to be like that. And now we're here. Now worlds are getting merged, and ideally things will start to settle down. But I've seen a few tyrants that are a part of my faction in my days. And ultimately, I'm very excited to see how they decide to bring that into place. They spent a lot of time talking about their longer cycles for PTR. And I think ultimately that's going to be a good thing, because it's going to allow them to be able to take in more feedback from the players. The PTRs are going to be primarily for those players who more are leveled and are super engaged. So the feedback could actually be slanted. And that's kind of my personal concern when it comes to feedback systems, is that usually the people who are willing to share their thoughts are your more engaged users, but that doesn't mean they're right. Like that's why it's important that I always try to get a wider selection of information from more people, due to having that kind of communication. I think it's ultimately more important. So, all right, we talked about that. They talked about the best place for submitting your feedback is the forums. So I'm continuing to do that. Hopefully you guys continue to do that. We actually have a section in our Discord, so that if you do share something and you want to get some more eyes on it from this community, please do so, because I want to be able to, even if I don't agree with your feedback, I do want to be able to engage with it, because I think, it comes down to the brainstorming mindset. If anybody's heard my theories about this, is that the best brainstorming sessions aren't ones where you shoot down ideas, where you don't sit here and say, no, that won't work, because it's yes and, yes or, So it's always kind of in a positive mindset, because even the craziest, dumbest ideas that could ruin something might actually lead to the better ideas in that regards. But if you get this mindset where people are afraid to share, then you don't actually have that real true brainstorming session that brings you to those eureka style moments. But that's just random Brian's creative thought process theory in a video, perfect for this kind of content. So we talked about server merges. Ultimately, the roadmaps, January, they're targeting for the mutators on the PTR. They're looking at February as a focus on balance, bugs, and bots, really kind of cleaning up that aspect. So it's think that March ultimately will be another big piece of content, which would give us a cadence. If you think about November and then January, January, February, I'm assuming maybe February, like you see January mutators on the PTR, February, you see those actually go into production. That's roughly about a 3-month cadence for content. February is going to be a hard month with Lost Ark and, more Final Fantasy and more, Destiny and all these things that are going to be happening in the first half of 2022. So it does kind of give them the ability to kind of really reset, really kind of build out their core audience, and then kind of go from there. And I think that's going to be really important to see how that goes. They go into depth on how their ban system works, and honestly, I'm not going to go too much into here, but there's a couple aspects. They have the EAC, which is running up front. Then they have their back end, and they continue to reiterate that a human being is reviewing that, but being that's human, it can and will make mistakes. So they're continually trying to work and improve that process as the game moves more into into kind of its maturity state of like stable, working, functional, and so much more. And then they finally talk about wrapping up the Isabella storyline, the Thorpe storyline, as it relates to the bad guys currently going on in the game and the story, and then moving into kind of more about the mystery of Eternum, more stories regarding other characters that we'll continue to see, while at the same time continuing to improve their quest structure, their system structure, and so much more about the core aspects of what makes this game, I think, instantly like this great place to play. And obviously I'm incredibly biased. I absolutely adore what New World is doing, and I'm very much excited to see where it goes from here. And that's going to be where I put all that kind of out for you. I believe I've hit all the high notes. If there's any questions that you guys have about what's going on in New World with this roadmap, if there's any questions that you guys want to share or any thoughts you want to share, I'm always game to read them in the comments. You can always hit me up on Discord. And thanks for being here. Thanks for spending time with me as I sit down to record my thoughts on the roadmap. I love you guys. Hopefully you are going to have a fantastic holiday, Christmas, Hanukkah, whatever celebrations you're celebrating this whole holiday season. And I will hopefully see you in my next video. But until then, take care.
I just want to say I'm really glad you're feeling better, and I love the videos. Well, I love you too. Michelle? Shoot for the moon, and so even if you fail, you'll reach the stars. Go for the 100K subscribers. Yeah.